What if your soul's journey after death is nothing like you've been told? And one of the greatest psychologists of all time saw exactly what happens next. This is not a ghost story, and it's not a religious sermon. This is about Carl Jung, a man who spent his entire life mapping the hidden landscapes of the human mind, having a vision so extraordinary, so unsettling that it blurs the line between psychology and the afterlife. Was it just a dream? A final flicker of a dying brain? Or was it something far more important, a psychological map of the soul's journey after death? Here's where it gets even more intriguing. These revelations weren't found in his public lectures or neatly published in his books. They come from Jung's private notes and rare personal accounts material so unique that it remained hidden from the public for decades. And what's inside is nothing short of shocking. In this video, we're going to walk through 7 of Jung's most surprising and profound insights about what happens after we die. These aren't abstract theories. They're vivid descriptions of the self, the shadow, the guides we may meet, and the light that may greet us. Each insight isn't just about death. It's about how you live now and how the choices you make today could shape the journey you take tomorrow. So stay with me, because the next few minutes could challenge everything you thought you knew about life, death, and the eternal path of the soul. Whether you approach this from a place of faith, curiosity, or skepticism, I promise, by the end of this video, you'll see Jung's vision in a way that's impossible to forget. When Carl Jung spoke of the self, he wasn't talking about your everyday personality. He wasn't talking about the version of you that pays bills, worries about deadlines, or scrolls through your phone late at night. The self in Jung's psychology is something much deeper. It's the true center of who you are, the eternal blueprint of your being that existed before you were born and will continue after you take your last breath. In his near-death vision, Jung described something extraordinary. He found himself standing before a vast, luminous mandala, a perfect symmetrical circle filled with intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with life. To him, this wasn't just beautiful. It was the symbol of totality. In Jungian psychology, the mandala represents wholeness, the point where all the fragments of your identity, your strengths, your flaws, your light, your shadow, come together in perfect balance. Imagine this for a second, all the parts of yourself you've rejected, denied, or hidden, now standing beside all the parts you're proud of. And in this moment, instead of fighting each other, they unite into something complete. That's what Jung believed the self was, the full, undivided you. Here's where it gets even more fascinating. Jung saw this meeting with the self not as a symbolic image, but as a living presence. In his vision, approaching the self felt like coming home to a truth you've always known, but somehow forgotten. And this wasn't just his idea. Cultures around the world have hinted at this same encounter. In Buddhism, they speak of realizing your Buddha nature. In ancient Greek philosophy, it's the gnoti se auton, know thyself. In Native American traditions, it's the moment when the soul meets the Great Spirit in pure recognition. But here's the catch. Jung believed that the way you meet the self in the afterlife depends on the work you've done in this life. If you've spent your years running from your flaws, avoiding your fears, or wearing a mask for the world, the self might feel like a stranger. But if you've been willing to face your shadow, heal your wounds, and integrate your opposites, then meeting this self becomes the ultimate homecoming. This is where the mandala matters. In his lifetime, Jung often painted mandalas during periods of deep personal change. He said they were cryptograms of the state of the soul. In his near-death experience, seeing the mandala was like seeing the final perfected image of himself. No missing pieces, no inner conflict, no shame or denial. And here's the question I want to ask you. If your soul were to meet its true self today, would it recognize you? Or would it feel like meeting a distant relative you've barely spoken to? Think about it. Every time you choose honesty over comfort, self-awareness over distraction, or forgiveness over resentment, you're building that bridge to yourself. You're shaping the image that one day you might see reflected back at you in perfect symmetry. In the end, Jung's first great insight is this: death is not the end of the self, it's the unveiling of it. And whether that unveiling feels like a reunion or a confrontation is entirely up to how you live right now. So as we move into the next insight, keep this in mind. What if your real task in life isn't just to survive, succeed, or be remembered, but to become whole? Because maybe wholeness is the passport you'll need for whatever comes next. Most people think that when you die, all the pain, guilt, and darkness you've carried just disappears. That the moment you cross over, you become pure light, free of anything uncomfortable. Carl Jung didn't see it that way. In his vision and in his decades of work with the human psyche, he realized something unsettling. Your shadow doesn't vanish when your heart stops beating. It follows you right to the threshold of whatever comes next. When Jung talked about the shadow, he wasn't speaking about some evil entity hiding in the dark. He meant the parts of ourselves we deny, suppress, or refuse to acknowledge: our anger, jealousy, shame, selfishness, and even the gifts we're too afraid to use. The shadow is everything we've pushed away because it didn't fit the image we wanted to show the world. Now here's the hard truth: if you never face your shadow in life, you may be forced to face it in death. Jung's insight suggests that the threshold after life, whatever that is for you, can be a place of reckoning. And how that reckoning feels depends on whether you've already done the work. Think of it like packing for a long journey. If you've sorted through your baggage beforehand, the trip is smoother. But if you've stuffed every fear, resentment, and regret into the suitcase of your soul, imagine trying to carry that across a bridge into the unknown. Heavy, isn't it? This is why Jung connected the idea of spiritual preparation to what he called shadow work. It's not just a therapeutic tool, it's training for your soul. Shadow work means intentionally turning toward the parts of yourself you'd rather avoid, not to destroy them, but to integrate them. For example, maybe you've spent years denying your anger because you were taught it's bad. Shadow work might help you see that your anger can be a signal for self-respect or a drive to protect what you love. Or maybe you've hidden your vulnerability because you thought it made you weak, only to discover that it's the very thing that makes deep connection possible. The more you integrate these hidden aspects, the less fragmented you become. And here's the beautiful part: Jung believed that when you meet your shadow consciously in life, you transform it from a threat into an ally. So imagine this: you reach the threshold after death and your shadow is there. But instead of a terrifying stranger, it greets you like an old friend, because you've already shared stories, learned from each other, and walked together in this life. That's the reunion you want. Jung's vision turns the usual idea of death on its head. It's not about escaping yourself, it's about bringing all of yourself with you in harmony. And it's not just spiritual talk. Even modern psychology backs this up. Unintegrated trauma, denied emotions, and unresolved conflicts often resurface during moments of extreme transition, whether in near-death experiences, deep meditation, or even dreams at the edge of consciousness. So here's my question for you. If the afterlife truly holds up a mirror to your soul, are you ready for what you'll see? Because here's the takeaway from Jung's second insight. The work of the soul isn't about becoming perfect, it's about becoming whole. And the only way to do that is to walk into your own darkness, not with fear, but with curiosity and compassion. If you start that journey now, you won't be crossing the final threshold burdened by the weight of an unknown shadow. You'll be stepping forward with the light of self-knowledge guiding you. At this point in Jung's vision, something unexpected happened. He wasn't alone anymore. Standing before him was a presence not threatening but undeniable. A gatekeeper. In Jungian terms, this figure is known as a psychopomp, a guide of souls. Someone or something whose role is to help you cross from one state of being to another. Jung didn't describe this encounter in vague, dreamy terms. It was vivid. The gatekeeper was the embodiment of transition, a bridge between the known and the unknown. Cultures across history have recognized this archetype. The ancient Greeks had Hermes, the swift messenger, who could travel between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. The Egyptians revered Anubis, the jackal-headed god, who weighed the hearts of the departed. In many Native American traditions, animal spirit guides like the raven wolf or eagle serve a similar purpose, leading souls safely through the spiritual landscape. And here's where Jung's insight gets fascinating. The gatekeeper is not just a mythological curiosity, it's a universal psychological symbol. He believed the mind, at the threshold of death, could summon an image powerful enough to act as a bridge to whatever comes next. The gatekeeper becomes both a guide and a mirror, reflecting the state of your own inner world. So what determines the form your gatekeeper takes? Jung might say it's shaped by your cultural background, your beliefs, and most importantly, the symbolic language your unconscious has been speaking to you your entire life. If you've always found safety in the image of a wise elder, perhaps that's who will meet you. If your deepest sense of guidance comes from nature, maybe it's an animal spirit. If your psyche resonates with ancient gods, you might see Hermes Anubis or another archetypal figure. The gatekeeper's role, however, is more than ceremonial. They are there to make sure you're ready, to see if you can step through the threshold with clarity, not fear. And here's the part that gave Jung's vision its weight. The gatekeeper doesn't just open the door, they may also ask a question. Something simple but soul-deep. A question that only you can answer truthfully. Imagine for a moment you're standing at the edge of existence, and a figure appears, looking straight into you. They ask, have you lived as the person you were meant to be? Could you answer without hesitation? This is why Jung urged us to think about the gatekeeper long before our final day, because meeting them isn't just an afterlife event. It's an inner journey we can start now. When you make decisions from your true self, when you face your shadow, when you heal old wounds, you're preparing for that meeting. From a psychological perspective, this archetype teaches us something profound. Transitions, whether in life or death, go smoother when we have a guide, someone to help us navigate uncertainty. In life, this might be a mentor, a therapist, a spiritual teacher, or even a deep friendship. In death, that guide becomes symbolic, drawn from the deepest wells of your psyche. So here's the question I'll leave you with. If you had to meet your gatekeeper today, who would they be, and would you be ready to follow them? Because Jung's third insight is this: when the time comes to cross over, you won't be going alone. The real question is whether you've built a relationship with the guide your soul has been sending you signals about all along. In many near-death experiences, people speak of the light, warm, infinite, all-embracing. But in Jung's vision, this wasn't just light as we know it. This was not photons or a beam from a distant star. It was something deeper, more ancient. Jung described it as a primordial consciousness, a presence that was both within him and far beyond him. It wasn't something his eyes could see in the physical sense, because it wasn't physical at all. Instead, it was as if the very core of awareness itself had taken form. Think about that for a moment. Light that isn't bound by time, space, or matter. Light that doesn't shine in the ordinary way, but awakens. When Jung stood in this presence, he felt not just illuminated, but known. Every part of him, his hopes, mistakes, unspoken fears, was transparent here. Not in a way that condemned him, but in a way that embraced the truth of who he was. Modern near-death research echoes this description. People who've been clinically dead and revived often say the light feels personal, intelligent, and loving. Some call it God, others call it the source, the universe, or even their higher self. Whatever the name, the sensation is the same total connection. No division between me and it. Just one vast ocean of awareness. From a psychological perspective, Jung saw this light as the ultimate archetype of unity, the point where the individual ego dissolves back into the whole. In life, our consciousness is like a drop of water. In death, that drop returns to the ocean it came from. The light is the ocean. And here's where it gets interesting for us still living. Jung believed we could begin touching this light now. Not in the full, overwhelming way that happens beyond the threshold, but in flashes, moments of deep meditation, moments when beauty stops us in our tracks, moments when we lose ourselves in love, art, or nature. These are the glimpses of primordial consciousness peeking through the cracks of daily life. So the question becomes, are we paying attention to those moments? Or are we rushing past them, too busy scrolling or chasing deadlines to notice Jung's fourth insight is powerful? Because it reframes the light from a distant end-of-life mystery into something we can nurture in ourselves today. When you slow down enough to feel presence, when you allow yourself to sit in pure awareness, you are, in a sense, training for that final return. In near-death studies, there's another fascinating pattern. People who encounter the light often come back with transformed priorities. They care less about possessions and more about relationships. Less about status and more about meaning. Jung's vision hints at why, once you've stood in that consciousness, you realize there's nothing to prove. You are already part of something infinite. And maybe that's the real takeaway. The light doesn't judge you for not being perfect. It simply reflects the truth and invites you to live more aligned with it. So I'll ask you this: if you knew that one day you would stand in the presence of a light that knows everything about you, what would you start changing now? What habits, what fears, what masks would you finally let go of? Because according to Jung, the light is not just waiting for you after death, it's quietly calling to you in life. And every time you answer, you bring a little more of that primordial consciousness into the world we share. When Carl Jung reached what he called the temple of the self in his vision, he didn't describe it as an ending. He didn't speak of it as a final cold stop. Instead, he experienced it as the beginning of something even greater, a continuation of the journey. This temple wasn't made of stone or brick. It was built from meaning itself, a place where every piece of your life, the triumphs, the heartbreaks, the lessons, was woven into a single tapestry. And standing before it, Jung realized something profound. Death was not a wall, but a doorway. This insight mirrors what we see in many spiritual traditions. In Buddhism, death is not the annihilation of the self, but a return to the source, what they call nirvana, or the cessation of illusion. In Taoism, life and death are part of the same cosmic flow, like the yin and yang, complementary phases of the same eternal rhythm. Jung's vision bridges these ancient perspectives with the language of depth psychology. He saw the temple as the symbolic center of the self, the ultimate archetype. Reaching it wasn't about erasing who you were, but integrating it so completely that nothing is left fragmented. Let's pause here. How would your life change if you truly believed that death was not the end, but a next chapter? Would you spend more time cultivating wisdom than chasing status? Would you focus more on healing old wounds than accumulating things you can't take with you? For Jung, the continuation after death wasn't some vague, dreamy concept. It was a conscious, living reality. He described it as a shift from the personal story into the universal story, where the soul takes its place in a greater pattern. And here's where it gets interesting. In Buddhist thought, the idea of returning to the source is often compared to a river flowing back into the ocean. The river doesn't disappear. It becomes something larger part of the vast waters that feed new life. Similarly, in Taoist philosophy, death is not seen as a break in existence, but a transformation in form. A leaf falls, but it enriches the soil. A star collapses, but it seeds new galaxies. Jung saw the temple of the self as that transformative space, the soul's ocean, the cosmic soil, the fertile ground from which new journeys may begin. And this means something radical for how we live now. If we prepare our minds, if we align with our deeper self while we're still alive, we may step through that doorway with clarity instead of fear. Psychologically, this is about integration. The temple isn't just waiting for you after death, it's something you can start building in your own consciousness today. Every time you face a shadow, every time you reconcile a part of yourself you once rejected, every time you live in alignment with your true values, you're laying another stone in that temple. Near-death experiencers often come back saying the same thing Jung implied. The other side isn't just about what happens then, it's deeply shaped by how we live now. If death is a continuation, then every choice we make is a page in a story that doesn't stop at our last breath. So here's the question I'll leave you with. If you knew that your consciousness will step forward into another chapter, would you prepare for it? The way you prepare for a big move or an important journey? Would you pack lightly, letting go of grudges, fears, and false identities? Or would you drag your unfinished business with you? Jung's fifth insight is both comforting and challenging. Comforting because it tells us we are more than our physical life. Challenging because it places responsibility back in our hands. The way we meet death is shaped by the way we live. And if the temple of the self is waiting, it's up to us to decide what we'll bring when we walk through its gates. Carl Jung believed that the afterlife isn't some random lottery where you're assigned a fate beyond your control. Instead, he saw it as a deeply personal continuation of the life you've already been living. The way you show up today, the choices you make, the wounds you heal, the truth you embody, becomes the blueprint for how you will cross that final threshold. Think about it this way. You wouldn't walk into an important meeting unprepared or take a long trip without packing the essentials. Yet most of us live as if death is a far-off abstraction, not realizing that we are right now packing for that journey. Jung emphasized three powerful areas that shape this passage. First, living authentically, not the version of yourself you think others want, but the one that feels aligned with your core values. When you live in a way that honors your truth, you strip away the false layers that weigh the soul down. Second, healing old wounds. This is more than just forgiving others. It's about reconciling with parts of yourself you've buried. Regrets, shame, unresolved anger, they all cling to the psyche like heavy luggage. If you don't put them down now, you may find yourself carrying them into a realm where letting go is much harder. And third, balancing the anima and animus, the feminine and masculine energies within each of us. For Jung, these weren't about gender, they were about wholeness. The anima represents receptivity, intuition, and emotional depth. The animus brings assertiveness, logic, and direction. When these two are in harmony, the soul steps into the afterlife in a state of integration, not fragmentation. Let's pause for a moment. If the afterlife reflects the inner landscape you've built here, what does your current inner world look like? Is it peaceful or chaotic, expansive or confined? Modern near-death experience research backs up Jung's insight. Many people report that upon crossing over, they experience environments or beings that seem to mirror their inner state. Those who lived with compassion and authenticity often describe entering places of light, connection, and clarity. Those who carried bitterness or fear sometimes find themselves in shadowy, confusing spaces until they begin the process of release. The takeaway is both hopeful and sobering. The afterlife is not a clean break from life. It's a continuation of the same psychological and spiritual work. The difference is, over there you can't fake it. Masks fall away. Only your true self remains. So ask yourself, what would it look like to prepare consciously? Maybe it means speaking a truth you've been afraid to voice. Maybe it's mending a relationship or accepting that some chapters need to be closed with grace. Maybe it's making peace with your own shadow so you don't meet it for the first time on the other side. Jung's sixth insight isn't about fearing death, it's about elevating life. It's a reminder that every day you're writing the opening chapter of your next existence. And if you approach that threshold with authenticity, healing, and inner balance, the afterlife may feel less like an unknown and more like coming home. Carl Jung believed that the soul's journey doesn't necessarily end after one lifetime. Instead, he suggested that the soul may pass through many cycles, returning again and again, not as punishment, but as an opportunity to reach greater wholeness. This wasn't just mystical speculation. For Jung, it tied directly to his concept of individuation, the lifelong process of becoming your truest self. Think about the idea of the eternal return like a spiral staircase. You're not going in circles aimlessly. You're rising each turn, taking you to a higher vantage point. You revisit familiar challenges, but each time you see them differently, respond differently, and grow in ways your past self couldn't have imagined. Many ancient traditions echo this idea. In Buddhism, it's the cycle of samsara, where rebirth continues until enlightenment is reached. In Hinduism, it's tied to karma, the belief that your actions shape not just this life, but the next. Even in some Native American traditions, the soul returns in new forms, carrying the wisdom of previous lives to help the community. For Jung, these parallels weren't proof of a single doctrine. They were signs of a shared human intuition that the journey of the soul is too vast, too intricate, to be contained in just one chapter. Here's the fascinating part. Jung didn't think of reincarnation as a simple recycling of the same person. He saw it more as the self, the deeper essence of who you are, continuing its evolution through different forms, different experiences, each lifetime, adding new colors to the soul's tapestry. And that brings us to a question worth asking yourself if you knew you'd be coming back. Maybe not as you, in the exact sense, but as a continuation of your soul's story. How would that change the way you live now? Would you treat people differently, knowing that the kindness you show could echo into another lifetime? Would you take more risks to follow your calling, knowing that every step forward enriches your soul for the next chapter? Modern research into past life memories, like the documented cases from Dr. Ian Stevenson at the University of Virginia, has given this concept a curious kind of weight. Children recalling details of lives they never lived, people having spontaneous memories under hypnosis. While skeptics remain unconvinced, Jung would likely have viewed these accounts not as proof in the scientific sense, but as meaningful symbols that point toward a deeper truth. The eternal return also shifts how we see mistakes and failures. Instead of being final verdicts, they become lessons that the soul can revisit and refine in another time, another place. It reframes life not as a one-shot opportunity, but as part of an ongoing apprenticeship in becoming whole. In this light, death isn't a closing door, it's a turning page. And the story doesn't just continue, it deepens. Every joy, every heartbreak, every hard-earned lesson is carried forward, shaping not only who you are now, but who you might one day become. So as we close this insight, remember, according to Jung, the soul's path may be longer and more intricate than we can imagine. But that's not cause for anxiety, it's cause for hope. Because if life truly returns, then every effort you make toward authenticity, compassion, and self-understanding isn't lost. It's an investment in all the lifetimes yet to come. So when we step back from Jung's visions, it's clear this isn't just about a Swiss psychologist having a strange experience near death. It's a mirror that reflects your own soul's journey, your own shadows, and light your own potential to step into something far greater than the life you see right now. Because if Jung's insights are even partly true, then death is not the end. It's a continuation, a doorway to the deepest self you've been building. With every thought, every choice, every act of courage or compassion in this life. And here's the question I want to leave you with. If you saw what Jung saw, if you stood at that threshold looking into that vast, radiant unknown, would you be ready for the journey? Would you feel whole enough to cross without regret? Would you feel at peace with the life you've lived? Or would there still be parts of your soul calling out for attention, healing, and integration? These are not easy questions. But that's exactly why they matter. Jung didn't share his visions just to impress us. He shared them to challenge us, to awaken us, to make us realize that preparing for death is not morbid. It's the most powerful way to live fully. And this is only the beginning. In our next video, we'll dive into the 7 archetypes Jung believed could guide the soul after death, mysterious forces that appear in myth, dream, and vision, waiting to meet you on the other side. So if you want to uncover more of these hidden truths that bridge psychology, spirituality, and the eternal self, subscribe now and turn on notifications. Not just so you don't miss the next chapter, but so you can keep walking this path with clarity, courage, and connection. Because your journey doesn't start after death. It's happening right now. And everything you do today shapes the road you'll walk tomorrow and beyond.